What's up guys, it's Tom here and welcome to a video where we will talk about Manchester City's potential relegation and the potential verdict on the 130 charges that they are facing, because football finance expert Kieran Maguire sent a huge warning to Man City that if they are found guilty of some of these charges, and surely they will be found guilty of some of these charges because 130 charges is an awful lot, and the Premier League has a mountain of evidence against Manchester City to find them guilty in some of these charges. So if they are found guilty, then they will face a potential 60 or 80 points deduction and relegation to the lower leagues, potentially as low as the National League, which is non-league football, but the minimum is the relegation to the Championship. So let's dive into this, because this is a very interesting topic that I've been covering on my channel. So if you are new here, make sure to subscribe and leave a like on this video if you enjoy all these updates around Manchester City's potential punishment, and leave your thoughts down below. What do you think will be Man City's punishment, and what do you think it should be Man City's punishment? And also, some people think Man City signing all these players and giving Haaland a 10-year contract means that they think they are not going to get relegated. That's wrong. Then we will find out in this video about that as well. So Man City are set to probably face an effective relegation from the Premier League into the English Football League if they are found guilty of the financial rule breaches. That verdict comes amid claims that Man City will be made an example of to act as a deterrent for the rest of football if they are found guilty to have breached the rules. And I think that makes sense. If you don't punish Manchester City heavily, and if you don't relegate them, then who is stopping Newcastle United from spending 500 million pounds to £1 billion in the next 1 or 2 years and do a Man City basically and just buy their way to the top of English football? And also, according to the rulebook, the EFL, the English Football League, will accept Manchester City into the Championship or League One or League Two if they are relegated to a lower tier of English football. In the allegedly most likely outcome of a points deduction, Man City would purportedly receive a penalty around 6 times as severe as Everton's points deduction for breaching profitability and sustainability rules. And that's what football finance expert Kieran Maguire claimed on the Football on Trial, the Manchester City Charges podcast on the BBC Radio 5 live show. And I will listen to the podcast in full, but here are some of the most interesting quotes. A points deduction would be the most likely outcome should Man City be found guilty, Maguire said. As for the quantum of points deduction, so the amount, if Everton were initially given a 10 points deduction for going around about 10 to 12 million pounds over the limits in one particular season, I think in order to set an example to the rest of football, this punishment that Man City are going to get should act as a deterrent. We will probably be looking at somewhere in the region of 60 to 100 point deductions, 100 points deducted from Manchester City. And they are not the Man City who got 100 points. So even if they get a 60 points deduction, that will most likely get them relegated, because probably 25-30 points will be still enough for a club to get relegated this season. Even 35 points could be enough, but probably 30 points. So Man City would effectively have to get 90 points or more to stay up if they get a 60 point deduction, and that is not going to happen. Man City are not getting 90 points. It's mathematically impossible. Even Arsenal could only get 89 points this season, even if they win all of their games. And Maguire acknowledged that if it appears Man City would have to be accepted by the English Football League, so they would have to be accepted into the Championship or League One, League Two. There has been a suggestion that the EFL might refuse to accept Manchester City in terms of its competition, but looking at their rulebook, I don't think that is feasible. And Kieran Maguire also brought up an interesting point, that a board of liars at Man City could be sacked if a guilty verdict will relegate Manchester City. So that is very, very interesting, and we will explore that in this video as well. So the independent hearing finished in December about Manchester City's breaches of financial fair play rules, and the verdict is expected in the coming weeks. I already made a video about that, and I think this is very encouraging news that a heavy points deduction, at least 60 to 100 points, is very, very likely if Man City are found to be guilty of breaching profit and sustainability rules and financial fair play rules and all kinds of regulations, and also they failed to cooperate with the Premier League during the investigation as well. And Maguire also believes that a guilty verdict would actually force the Man City board of directors to leave their posts, to get sacked. The other thing that would happen, Maguire said, is that the board of directors at Manchester City effectively would be proven to be liars, and they misrepresented the state of the football club to the authorities, so I don't see how they can keep their jobs. There have been claims in the past that Man City may not have anywhere to go if they are relegated or expelled from the Premier League, but Maguire believes that the EFL would have to take them. And David Ornstein, who is a very reliable journalist, revealed the internal verdict on the worst possible financial fair play punishment, and this springtime verdict would be seismic for English and for European football. Because remember, Man City are now one of the top clubs in Europe, but they bought their way to the top by breaking the rules. They must be punished heavily just to deter other clubs from doing the same. I mean, can you imagine if Newcastle had free reign? They would just spend £1 billion every season and just build the best team possible. And David Ornstein has revealed that we are a month away, maybe 2 months away, from hearing the verdict, which will be, of course, subject to an appeal from either side. It's just over 2 years ago since those charges, and the feeling I get from speaking to people at and around Man City is that we could be looking at a springtime verdict, so maybe a month or two away, and that feels pretty soon. Of course, this is still subject to potential appeals in that process as well, but the verdict would feel like a seismic moment, whatever the outcome. And Manchester City's January spending, let's talk about that as well, because many people said, yeah, this is proof that Man City will be not found guilty because look how much they spent in January. And that's exactly why they spent so much money in January, because if they are relegated, they won't be able to spend as much, because in the lower leagues, the financial restrictions would actually not allow Man City to spend anywhere near what they spent in January. David Ornstein claims that Man City were not preempting a potential punishment. He has also revealed their verdict on the worst possible sanction they could face. The important point to say from Man City's perspective is that they are totally confident that they will be exonerated and prove their innocence, so they are operating as usual, David Ornstein said. We saw them do a lot of business in the January transfer window. None of that business, to my knowledge, was to preempt potential punishment, because they don't think they are going to be punished for these alleged breaches. In the contract negotiations they have been holding in recent years, the transfer talks that have taken place, no clauses have been inserted into those deals to stay. If City are punished and get relegated, this is going to happen. Players want to join Manchester City and they are continuing with everything that they are doing. It had no impact on Pep Guardiola signing a new contract in autumn, on Erling Haaland, in the story I broke in January, on Sporting Director Chiki Bagiristan's decision to leave the club as Sporting Director, that was long planned, or Hugo Viana's decision to replace him. Man City think that they are going to be fined, and let's see how it materializes. And I think that would be an absolute disgrace to English football, and it would just allow the likes of Newcastle and Chelsea to spend whatever they like. Because if you just get a fine for a very rich club, that's not a punishment. A very rich club who has billions of pounds, a fine is not a big punishment really. But what do you think will happen? What do you think will Man City properly get punished and get relegated to the lower leagues? I would love to see them slogging it out in non-league football, but even League 2 or League 1 would be fantastic. If you just relegate them to the Championship, 1 year outside of the Premier League is not enough punishment in my opinion, even though some stars might leave, but some players might even be loaned out to parent or sister clubs of Manchester City. Man City have like 10 or 12 clubs around the world, so they could effectively loan out some of their players to those clubs and have them pay all of their wages. It would still be a big punishment, but not big enough in my opinion if they got just relegated to the championship. And it's interesting to think that what it would actually look like, relegation. I think it's safe to say the majority of their first team would leave if they do get relegated to third or fourth or fifth division of English football. I can't see Haaland playing 2, 3, 4 years of his career in the lower leagues of English football without Champions League football as well. But Man City do have one of the best academies in world football, and between their kids and some players that will hang around, like Oscar Bob or Rico Lewis, who are youth academy players as well, and they absolutely love Man City. And also they could sign, of course, some new players. There would be a lot of loan players coming in, so they would get promoted straight away back up. I think that's safe to say. I would love to see Pep Guardiola in a non-league football, League 1 or League 2. Imagine the exposure of those leagues, how much those leagues would benefit from Man City just going through the leagues and getting promoted season after season. And a lot of eyes would go to the Championship or League 1 if Man City got relegated there, which would be fun. Of course, it's a good point by another commenter that Man City were relegated 20 years ago and football survived without them, but Man City are now a much bigger club with, of course, an iconic manager and some iconic players like Haaland. And of course, half of Man City's first team will leave anyway this summer, the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, Gundogan, Kovacic, maybe others as well. And there is a theory that if Man City are just relegated to the Championship, that they would loan out a lot of players, but keep enough squad players to get promoted with ease. As a result, the brand image will skyrocket. They will be seen as even bigger winners for having outcome such adversary. If they are found guilty, they should be sent to the National League and suffer all the financial restrictions associated with it. I fully agree. But there is a counter argument to this, because Man City won't have the money to do that due to the advertisement revenue and TV deals. They simply can't afford to subsidize wages, and you are not going to find 10 to 15 teams who can afford the wages of 10 to 15 players for a season. But as I said, because Man City have so many sister clubs, they can easily loan out some of their players to their sister clubs, and the sister clubs are also bankrolled by Abu Dhabi and the Man City owners, so they would have no problem paying Haaland's wages for a season or two. But it's a good point that most of those sister clubs of Man City don't have Champions League football. So would Haaland play on loan at a Man City sister club without Champions League football for 1 year, maybe for 2 or 3 years? I just don't see it happening. So there is a likely scenario that there will be mass exits of players and potentially the manager as well if Man City gets relegated. And Man City won't be able to do much about it. I'm sure most players will have something in their contracts protecting them from this case. But David Ornstein said that there are no clauses, relegation clauses, in the new Man City contracts signed recently. I mean, if Haaland doesn't have a relegation clause in his contract, that's absolutely crazy. Why would he sign a 10-year contract at Man City without knowing where Man City will be playing next season? That's a crazy scenario. Of course, Man City could sell replaceable players like Ederson and Guardiola, Haaland, Doku, Foden, Grealish would be all loaned out, and they would probably win the championship if they just get relegated to the championship, playing Rico Lewis, Oscar Bob and some of the other young players. But the finances between the Premier League and the Championship and the other EFL leagues is absolutely massive, gigantic. The reason why relegated clubs receive parachute payments is not for them not to go bankrupt. You are also making an assumption that these top players will happily play in the Championship for a tenth of their current wages for a season or two, and 2 years without Champions League football at least. That's very unlikely. Maybe some players will play in the Championship, maybe some players won't, but I would love to see how that will play out, because Juventus also got relegated to Serie B for breaking financial rules, and some of their stars like Buffon and Del Piero stayed, helped Juventus get promoted, and after that even won the league with Juventus in later years. But the player contracts at Man City likely have bonuses related to winning the Premier League or the Champions League rather than relegation clauses or wage reductions. Same with their sponsors, because the idea that they would go down wasn't a realistic prospect when most of these deals were signed. I mean, that's why I think it would be very strange if the Haaland contract didn't have a relegation clause. But no Premier League and no Champions League would cost Man City around 200 million. They would be still paying Haaland like £300,000 per week. In the Championship, they would come straight back up and then likely qualify for the Champions League the following year. Some players would leave to help minimize the losses. They would keep most of their squad to ensure it was a 1 or 2 year blip away from the top. But there is a scenario that most of the players will leave, and even Pep Guardiola could leave if they get relegated, even though he said very adamantly that he would stay at Man City if they got relegated. So that's why I want them relegated to the 3rd or 4th division. I want to see Guardiola in the lower leagues of English football for at least 2 or 3 seasons. How fun that would be. For English football, not so much for Man City, but for us rival fans, it would be hilarious as well. Can you imagine Man City playing against Accrington Stanley and Notts County and teams like that regularly each season? I mean, I would love to see that happen. Many viewers, many football fans think that Man City should not only get relegated, but their titles and trophies won during this period of cheating should be stripped. And it would send the right message to all football clubs that cheats don't prosper, cheats don't succeed, cheats get punished heavily. And the runners-up should be declared champions, in my opinion. I agree. Of course, making a runners-up become champions would result in a lot of lawsuits, but those lawsuits should be directed at Man City. They should be paying out the loss of bonuses that, Liverpool won the league twice without Man City in the league. Man City were in the league cheating, so Liverpool won the Premier League twice like that, should have won the Premier League twice, and they should get some bonuses, payments from Manchester City for missing out on a lot of bonuses. Of course, clubs wouldn't have gotten the commercial benefits the next few seasons, because when you sign a sponsorship deal, it's different if you win just one Premier League title in the last 5 years, or if you have won 3. The courts should make Man City pay all those bonuses to the other clubs. That's my opinion. Let me know what is yours in the comments below. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a nice day. See you later. Goodbye.